The humans gave Vekk the key to every weapon on their ship 4 minutes before the enemy fleet arrived. And the captain's exact words were, "If someone has to fire first today, Commander, it will have to be you. We can't." Vekk Tarash had spent 40 years dreaming of the day he would hold human lives in his hands. He had imagined it as vengeance. He had never once imagined it as a burden they would hand him willingly, with steady eyes, on a burning bridge, while their own children's world hung undefended behind them. To understand why the oldest enemy humanity had ever made was standing on the bridge of a human warship, holding their firing key, you have to go back 3 weeks, to the day he came aboard, intending to hate every soul on her. The ship was called the Aurelia, and Vekk hated her before he ever saw her. He hated the clean white curve of her hull, so unlike the blade-shaped warships of his own people. He hated the way her airlock smelled of coffee and machine oil and something green, because humans grew plants on their warships, actual living plants, as if a vessel built for killing deserved gardens. He hated the young officer who met him at the docking ring and smiled at him, because Vekk knew that smile was a lie. Everything about humans was a lie. He had believed that for 40 years, and he had the scars and the empty family hole to prove it. Deck was Kavari, the last living fleet commander from the Battle of Sindral Reach, and among his people that made him something between a hero and a wound that refused to close. 40 years ago, he had watched 30 Kavari warships die in 11 minutes. He had watched his younger brother's cruiser fold in half under human fire, so precise it seemed less like combat and more like surgery. Resk had been 26 years old. His voice had still been on the comm when the ship broke, halfway through a sentence, halfway through a life. And the part that Vekk could never forgive, the part that had calcified in his chest like a second skeleton, was this. The humans had let themselves be shot first. Every Kavari who studied the battle knew it. The human squadron had sat motionless at the edge of the Sindral Reach for 6 hours while the Kavari fleet advanced. They had not raised weapons. They had not maneuvered. They had broadcast the same message over and over, in flat, calm voices, asking the Kavari to turn back. And when the Kavari opened fire, as any warrior people would when an enemy blocked their path, the humans had absorbed the first volley, and the second, and the third. Ships had died in those volleys, human ships. Human crews, burning in silence, holding formation, not firing back. And then, on some invisible signal, they had answered. 11 minutes later, the Kavari Expeditionary Fleet no longer existed. The galaxy called it discipline. Human diplomats called it doctrine. Vekk called it what he knew it was, a trap. A species that lets you shoot it first is a species buying something with its own blood. And what the humans had bought at Sindral Reach was the right to slaughter without consequence. No tribunal could condemn them. No council could sanction them. They were attacked, the record said. They defended themselves, the record said. It was the coldest thing Vekk had ever seen, and he had spent 40 years telling every Kavari who would listen exactly what humans were. Butchers who wore patience like armor and morality like a knife. He had written it in his memoirs. He had said it in the war halls. He had repeated it to a generation of angry young Kavari who grew up in the shadow of a lost war, on a homeworld whose minds were failing and whose pride was starving. He did not yet understand what that had cost. He would. The peace between humanity and the Kavari Concord was 11 years old now, and this voyage was its final clause, an exchange of observers, veterans of the old war. placed aboard each other's ships so that neither side could prepare a betrayal in darkness. The Concord had chosen Vekk precisely because he hated humans. "Send the one they cannot charm," the High Speaker had said. "Send the one who will see the knife behind the smile." So Vekk came aboard the Aurelia with a recorder, a diplomatic seal, and 40 years of grief sharpened to an edge, and he began looking for the knife. His liaison was an ensign named Rhea Calder, 23 years old, with brown skin and quick hands, and a habit of talking when she was nervous, which around Vekk was always. She showed him the engine decks, the hydroponics bay, the long gallery where off-duty crew played a game with paper cards that seemed to have no consistent rules. She showed him everything he asked to see, which itself made him suspicious. On a Kavari ship, an enemy observer would see 3 corridors and a stateroom. There was only one door on the Aurelia that stayed closed to him. It was on the command deck, near the captain's quarters, a small hatch marked with no label at all, only a thin line of steel inlaid in the shape of a broken circle. When Vekk asked what was behind it, Ensign Calder's endless talking stopped. "That's the Keel Shrine," she said finally. "It's not classified. It's just private. Every ship has one." "A shrine," Vekk said. "Humans do not have gods." "No," Calder agreed, and did not explain. And for the first time in 40 years, a human had made Vekk curious, instead of angry. He noted the door in his recorder, and told himself it was where they kept the knife. He met the captain on his 3rd day aboard. Mara Voss was old for a human, past 60, with white hair cropped short, and a face like weathered stone. She greeted him without warmth and without hostility, and told him plainly that he could go anywhere, record anything, and ask any question, and that she expected he would believe none of the answers. "You were a soldier," Vekk said. It was not in her file that he'd been given, but he could see it in the way she stood. "Gunnery," Voss said. "A long time ago. Where did you serve?" She looked at him for a moment too long. And then she said, "Sindral Reach," and walked off her own bridge. And Vekk stood there feeling the deck tilt under him, though the gravity had not changed at all. The woman commanding the ship had been behind the guns that killed his brother. The humans had to know that. The Concord had to know it. Someone, somewhere, had put him aboard this specific ship on purpose, and Vekk spent 2 sleepless nights trying to decide whether it was meant as an insult, a test, or a message. He settled on insult. Hatred is a habit, and habits choose the familiar answer. He was still composing his formal protest when the raiders hit the convoy. The Aurelia was escorting 9 civilian ships through the Talus Corridor, a stretch of empty space that curved along the edge of a region every chart in the galaxy marked the same way. A gray zone, 40 light-years wide, labeled only "Closed by Treaty, Human ODEC Authority." The closed stars. No ship entered, no ship left. For 2 centuries, humanity had guarded that darkness and refused to say what was inside it, and the galaxy had drawn the obvious conclusion. Because there is only one reason a species hides 40 light-years of space: a weapon. Something vast. Something they were saving. Zephyros believed it too. His fleet had died 40 years ago, trying to chase a ghost signal into that darkness. He had never learned what the signal was. He had only learned what humans did to those who came close. The raiders came out of the corridor's dust shadow at high burn. 8 ships, fast and ugly, built from salvaged Kavari hulls. Exile clans. Vekk knew them instantly, and his stomachs turned over. because the clan markings burned into their bows were markings he knew personally, the Sunder Banner. The clans that had refused the peace, that had spat on the Concord's treaty and fled to the outer dark rather than clasp hands with humans. The clans whose young warriors had grown up reading Vekk's memoirs. Weapons range in 90 seconds. The Aurelia's tactical officer said, calm as a man reading a menu. Shield the convoy, Captain Voss said. Do not arm weapons. Vekk turned from the viewport to stare at her. They are exile raiders. They have come to kill and take. Arm your weapons, human. Not until they fire, Voss said. They will fire. Then we won't have long to wait, will we? The Aurelia slid her white bulk between the raiders and the convoy, like a mother animal putting her body over her young. The raiders opened fire at maximum range, undisciplined, hungry, and the first volley walked across the Aurelia's dorsal shields in blooms of orange light. The deck shuddered. Damage reports began, quiet voices in a quiet room. Shield failure on 2 sectors, a relay fire on Deck 9, a crewman injured. Voss did not move. Hold, a second volley. This one got through in one place, and Vekk felt the hit in his bones, a deep animal thud, and somewhere below them a compartment was venting, and a human voice on the comm was saying, hull breach, Deck 9, 2 casualties. And still the captain of the Aurelia stood with her hands behind her back, watching, and her ship did not fire. Vekk had seen this before, 40 years ago, from the other side. He had stood on a bridge and watched human ships take fire in silence, and he had felt contempt, and then confusion, and then, 11 minutes later, terror. Now he stood inside the silence, and it was worse. It wasn't calm. He could see that now, this close. The tactical officer's hands were shaking. Ensign Calder, at her station, had tears on her face, and her jaw set like iron. The whole bridge was a held breath, a room full of human beings burning to shoot back and refusing, and Vekk realized with a shock that the silence he had hated for 40 years was not coldness. It was costing them. Every second of it was costing them. The third raider volley destroyed one of the Aurelia's point defense arrays and killed the 2 engineers who were fighting the fire on Deck 9. And Captain Voss closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, opened them, and said, weapons free, engines and weapons only. I want their crews alive. What happened next took 4 minutes, and Vekk would remember it for the rest of his life, not for its violence, but for its restraint. The Aurelia's guns did not destroy a single raider ship. They took them apart. An engine block sheared away here, a weapon's spine severed there, each shot placed like a scalpel until 8 exile raiders drifted powerless and intact, their crews alive and helpless. And the entire engagement had lasted less time than the humans had spent letting themselves be hit. That would have been enough. That alone would have cracked something in Vekk's certainty. But then one of the raider hulks began to burn from within, its salvaged reactor going unstable, and its crew of exile Kavari, warriors who had come to kill this ship, began to bail out in pods that were failing. And Captain Voss said full words Vekk had never heard any commander of any species say about an enemy. Get our people over there. Human rescue crews boarded a burning enemy ship to drag Kavari raiders out of the fire. A human petty officer named Duran, whom Vekk had never met and never would, went back in for a trapped exile gunner when the reactor was 2 minutes from letting go, got the Kavari out, and did not come out himself. That night, the Aurelia's crew held a service for their 3 dead. Vekk stood at the back of the hangar deck and watched 200 humans stand in silence, while the captain read the names. And then he watched something that made no sense at all. At the end of the human names, Voss read 4 Kavari names. The exile raiders who had died before rescue reached them. She read them carefully, in passable Kivari, getting the clan horrifics right, and the humans-sized bowed their heads for their enemies dead, exactly as they had for their own. Vekk went back to his quarters and sat in the dark for 6 hours, and for the first time in 40 years, the hatred in his chest had a crack in it, and through the crack came something worse. Doubt. The interrogation of the raider survivors broke the doubt open into fear. Vekk was committed to observe, and the young exile gunner, the one petty officer Duran had died saving, would not speak to the humans at all. But he spoke to Vekk. He knelt to Vekk, actually knelt, his eyes shining, and called him War Commander, and said the words that turned Vekk's blood to ice water. "We weren't here for the convoy, Honored One. The convoy was the bait to pull the human ship out of position. The banner has it. After 40 years we finally had the mystery, wild by the sidewalk racing. The bait with star, a tall buzzing with dead, a tall booting with dead. I know that you will, but this was the first we can." The young warrior's face was lit with a terrible joy. "War Speaker Khan is taking the whole fleet in. We're going to take the humans' hidden weapon and burn the peace your generation was too broken to refuse. He said you would understand, Honored One. He said he learned everything from you. Khan, Vekk's grand-nephew, Resk's grandson. The boy who had grown up in Vekk's house after the war, raised on Vekk's stories, fed every day of his childhood on Vekk's hatred, until the day he took the sundered banner's oath and vanished into the dark." Vekk had told himself the boy was lost to fanatics. He had never let himself finish the thought, "Fanatics that I built." A war speaker preaching a gospel of human treachery, and every verse of it written by Vekk Tarash. 40 ships of the sundered banner were on their way into the closed stars to seize a weapon and restart a war, and the man who had lit that fuse 40 years ago was standing in a human brig, watching it burn down. Vekk went to find the captain. He found her, in the one place on the ship he had never been. The unmarked door on the command deck stood open. Inside was a room barely large enough for 4 people, and it held only 3 things: a shelf, a single chair, and a book. A physical book, huge, ancient, its cover made from a plate of scorched metal. Captain Voss sat in the chair with the book open on her knees, and she was writing in it, slowly, by hand. 3 names tonight, she said, without looking up. Duan, Reyes, Okonkwo. She turned back through the pages, a long way back, and Vekk saw that the book was names, nothing but names, thousands of them, page after page, in dozens of hands, some entries faded almost to nothing. Every ship keeps one. It goes back to the ship before this one that carried the name Aurelia, and the one before that. "You're dead," Vekk said. "No," said Voss. "Everyone's south." She turned the book toward him, to a section deep in the middle, and the script there was not human script. It was Kivari. Hundreds of Kivari names, written in careful, struggling human handwriting, with the clan honorifics correct, and at the head of the section, a date Vekk knew better than his own hatching day, and a place name that stopped his hearts. Sindro Reach. I was 19, Voss said quietly. Gunnery tech, 2nd battery, on the Sarisa. I keyed the firing solutions that day. Afterward, we requested your fleet's crew manifests through the neutral embassy. It took 6 years to get them. Then we wrote them in. All of them. Every ship in the human navy that fired at Sindro Reach carries those names. And once a year, we read them. Vekk's hand was moving before he willed it, turning pages down the columns of his dead. And then he stopped, because there it was, in blue ink, in the handwriting of the woman sitting in front of him. Vekk Tarash. Third cruiser, Talon of Dawn. Brother. Someone had told them. Someone had told them, and they had written it down. Brother. Vekk stood in that little steel room holding 40 years of hatred in his hands, and it had never felt so heavy or so useless. Why? He said, and his voice came out ruined. Why do you keep them? To gloat? To count? To pay? Voss said. You've been on this ship 3 weeks, Commander. You've been watching us your whole life. You must have asked yourself the question by now. Not why we're dangerous. Everyone knows Deathworlders are dangerous. The real question, she closed the book gently, why do humans never fire first? Not ever. Not once in 200 years. Not even when it kills us. You watched us bleed for it 3 days ago. Ask me. I know the answer, Vekk said. But the old certainty tasted like ash now. Doctrine. Legal cover. You let the enemy condemn himself and then your hands are clean. That's what I believe too, in your place. Voss stood, and she suddenly looked every year of her age. I couldn't tell you the truth 3 days ago. I've just been given clearance to tell you now, because in about 70 hours, your grandnephew's fleet is going to arrive at the place where the answer lives, and someone from your people needs to see it and survive to say what it was. She stepped past him into the corridor. We're already at maximum burn, Commander. We're the only ship close enough. Aurelia is going into the closed stars, and you're coming with us. For 2 days, the Aurelia ran. Vekk barely swept. He recorded 17 messages to Khan and erased them all, because what could he possibly say? Turn back. The humans are not what I told you. Khan had a fleet, a cause, and a grand-uncle's library of hatred to quote from. Words had made this. Vekk no longer trusted words. Ensign Calder found him in the observation gallery on the second night, staring at the starless smear ahead, where the closed stars ate the light. She stood beside him in silence for a while, this human child younger than his hatred, and then she said, Sir, can I tell you something? Everyone in the fleet takes an oath when they're commissioned. Not to the government, not to Earth. It's older than the fleet regulations, and it's only one sentence, and we take it at a place you're about to see. She looked at him. I used to think it was just tradition. Then 3 days ago, I watched Chief Durand die because of it, and I understood. It's not tradition, sir. It's a debt. What is the sentence? Vekk asked. You'll hear it, she said, where it was first said. They crossed into the closed stars on the 3rd day, past picket stations that challenged them twice, and human warships that shadowed them in silence, deeper and deeper into space, the galaxy had spent 2 centuries imagining as an arsenal. Vekk stood on the bridge, braced to see humanity's hidden weapon, the Doomsday Fleet, the World Cracker, whatever nightmare justified 40 light-years of secrecy. And the Aurelia dropped out of jump into golden light, and Vekk looked upon the great secret of the human race. It was a garden, a yellow star, a green and blue world, small and warm, wrapped in weather, orbital farms, turning slowly in the light. A handful of stations, no fortress, no fleet beyond a thin ring of aging human pickets. And rising over the curve of the bright little world, held in a halo of station-keeping lights, a wreck. It was a ship, or it had been. Vast, old, alien in a way that matched nothing in Vekk's long education in the shapes of war. Its hull was a shattered spiral, burned open along its whole length, and it had been preserved exactly as it died, every wound left open, orbiting that garden world for 200 years like a scar the sky refused to heal. Her name was the Sarah Lynn, Captain Voss said. As close as human throats can come to saying it, she was an Ark, the last Ark of a species called the Vaith, whose star failed them. 11,000 souls, in deep sleep, most of them children, running from a dead system toward a world their probe said was empty. She had no weapons. She wasn't broadcasting on any channel our ships were built to hear. And 206 years ago, she rose out of jump shadow in front of a human patrol that had been at war with pirates for 3 years. And a human captain with 8 seconds to decide looked at a vast unknown ship on an intercept course and fired first. The bridge was silent. On the screen, the broken spiral of the Cerulean turned slowly in the golden light. We killed 10,641 Vekk before we understood what we were shooting at, Voss said, and though the grief in her voice was 2 centuries old, it was not second-hand. 309 survived in shielded sleep pods. Children, almost all of them. The last of an entire people. The last of an entire people, orphaned by a single human mistake that lasted 8 seconds. She turned to face Vekk fully.
Do you understand what that does to a species like mine, Commander? We are a Deathworld people. We spent our whole history learning that hesitation kills, that you strike first or you die. It took the Cerulean to teach us what that instinct costs when you carry it to the stars. So we made 2 promises.
The first was to the survivors, that they would have a world and a sky, and that no one would ever reach them without coming through us. Not because they're weak, because we owed them a species worth of protection, and 200 years is only the beginning of paying it. And the second promise, Vekk said slowly, is the sentence, the oath. Every human who has ever served on a warship has taken it in sight of that wreck, Voss said. 9 words. She said them, and her whole bridge crew said them with her, quietly, the way people speak in the presence of the dead. We fired first once. We will never fire first again. Zephyros stood very still while 40 years of history rearranged itself around him. Sindral Reach. His fleet, chasing a ghost signal into Perfidin space, and a thin line of human ships that would not move, and would not shoot, and would not explain, because the explanation was the secret, because behind them, close enough that one jump would have carried the Hivari vanguard into orbit, was a garden full of the lost children of a murdered species. The humans hadn't been buying legal cover with their blood that day. They had been standing between his guns and the grave of their greatest shame, keeping both of their promises at once, dying for the first one rather than break the second. You could have told us, Vekk whispered. 40 years ago. You could have simply told us, told the galaxy that the terrifying human Deathworlder's great secret is a small world of gentle survivors who cannot defend themselves, Voss said. Every scavenger, slaver, and vengeance cult in 4 arms of the galaxy would have come to test it. Secrecy was their shield, Commander. It worked for 2 centuries. Her jaw tightened, and she looked at the tactical display, at the cluster of red contacts that had just begun to bloom at the system's edge. It stopped working today. The sundered banner came out of jump in battle formation. 41 ships, blades and salvage and fury. And at their head, a heavy war barge, broadcasting on all channels, in the voice of a young male Kevari that Vekk had once taught to fish in the cold lakes of the homeworld. People of the banner, the signal was true. The humans' hidden system lies open before us. Whatever they guard here is the engine of their power. Take it, and the long shame ends today. A pause, and then, softer, with something almost like love in it. And to the honored ancestor I am told, stands aboard the human ship, Grand Uncle. You showed me what humans are. Stand aside, and watch your student finish your work. Vekk closed his eyes. Every word the boy spoke was a mirror. The tactical situation was arithmetic, and the arithmetic was fatal. The Aurelia, still wounded from the corridor. 6 human picket ships, old and light, built to watch, not to fight. Reinforcements, 19 hours away. 41 banner ships, and behind the thin human line, A world with no shield, but the promise of a species that was outnumbered 7-1. And the banner had not yet fired. That was the trap of it. The cruel geometry that Khan, raised on Vekk's own books, understood perfectly. The exile ships advanced in weapons range, slow, insolent, daring, and they did not fire because Khan knew. Vekk's memoirs had told him, humans never fire first. So the banner would simply advance, closer and closer, into perfect killing position, past the pickets, down toward the garden. And if the humans' oath held, the exiles would reach orbit without a shot, and if the oath broke, then Khan would have proven to the galaxy that human honor was a lie, and either way, the banner won. Khan had turned humanity's oldest promise into a noose, and he was tightening it in front of the wreck of the Cerulean itself. Firing solutions locked on all lead elements, the Aurelius tactical officer said, hollow. They'll be in position to bombard the service in 9 minutes, Captain. If they get that geometry, we can't stop the first salvo. Not all of it. Hail them again. They're refusing. Vekk watched Captain Voss stand in the fire of the worst choice her species had ever built for itself. Break a 200-year oath sworn to the dead, in front of the dead, and become the thing the galaxy had always whispered humans were. Or keep it, and watch the children of the Cerulean burn a second time, and this time in full knowledge, this time by choice. She turned and looked at Vekk, and he saw her find the third door. Commander Vekk Tarash, she said, formally. You are a flag officer of the Kavari Concord, a signatory power of the Accords, present on this bridge with full diplomatic standing. You are not bound by our oath. She drew the command key from around her neck, the master authority for every weapon the Aurelia carried, and she held it out to him. And the whole bridge went silent as vacuum. If someone has to fire first today, Commander, it will have to be you. We can't. And there it was. The moment 40 years of hatred had begged for. Human lives, human weapons, a human war, all of it in his hand, in one small key, still worn from her skin. You would trust me with this, Vekk said. I have hated your species for longer than most of your crew has been alive. I told the man out there everything he believes. I know, Voss said. That's why it has to be you. He won't hear us, Commander. He was raised not to. But he might hear the man who raised him. Vekk took the key. It weighed nothing. It weighed more than his brother's coffin. Open a channel to the banner flagship, he said. All ships, both fleets, and give me tactical control of your forward battery. He stood in the center of the human bridge, an old enemy holding their trigger, and he spoke to the fleet his hatred had built. Warriors of the sundered banner, you know my voice. You have my books on your ships. Some of you can recite them. He let out a slow breath. I am ordering you, as War Commander of Syndral Reach, to look at what you are aiming at. The human's great secret lies under your guns, and I have seen it. It is not a weapon. It is a grave, and a garden, and 300 children's children of a species this galaxy already failed once. There is no engine of human power here, except a promise. I know, because for 40 years, I called that promise a lie, and today I watched what it costs them to keep it. His voice cracked, and he let it. Khan, child of my brother's line. I told you humans wait for you to fire first, because they are butchers seeking permission. I was wrong. They wait because they fired first once, at this place, at these people, and they have spent 200 years refusing to become that again. That is not weakness, boy. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen a species do. Turn your fleet around. Do not make my mistake the last thing our clan gives to history. Silence on the channel. On the tactical display, 11 banner ships slowed. Then 15. The form of God, phase. And then Karin's voice, and it was shaking, not with doubt, but with betrayal, the special fury of a true believer watching his prophet kneel. They broke you, the great Vekk Tarash, ending his days as a human's trained voice. Then the banner has no ancestors. Whatever hides on that world, it dies with their oath. And the war barge's dorsal batteries lit, hot and unmistakable, target locks blooming across the garden world's northern hemisphere, charging toward the one salvo the humans could not stop. And every human on the bridge of the Aurelia watched their 200-year-old promise and the last of the Vaith die in the same 4 seconds. Except that Vekk Tarash was not human. He had come aboard this ship to find the knife the humans were hiding. He fired it instead. One shot from the Aurelia's forward battery, with a firing solution 40 years of gunnery had ridden into his hands, and it crossed the dock and took the warbarge's dorsal spine off at the root. Clean, surgical, merciful, human. The salvo died unborn. The barge tumbled, engines dead, crew alive, guns gone, exactly the way ships had died at Sindril Reach, and every warrior of the Sundered Banner saw it and understood, in their marrow, what had just happened. The first shot of the battle had been fired by the last alien who hated humans. In defense of humanity's promise, at his own blood, the banner broke. Not in flight, in something wearer. Ship by ship, their weapons went dark, their engines went cold, and one by one, on the open channel, exile captains who had memorized Vekk's hatred began to transmit the old surrender word, the one that does not mean defeat, the one that means we submit to a truth. The Aurelia's guns stopped 4 ships that fired anyway. She stopped them the human way, engines and weapons, crews alive, and the human rescue teams were moving before the last hull went quiet. They pulled Khan out of the wreck of his barge alive. Vekk went down to the hangar deck to face him, expecting fury, and got something harder, a young warrior standing amid his failure, staring through the base shielding at the golden world below, at the small shape rising from it, a Vaith shuttle. The elders of the garden had asked to come up when they heard, asked to meet the people who had come to kill them. The Vaith elder was slight and grey-feathered and old, and she walked past the human honor guard, past Vekk, and stopped in front of Khan, the warrior twice her size who had aimed a fleet at her grandchildren an hour before. The bay went silent. 200 years ago, a species killed almost all of us in 8 seconds, she said, in careful Concord trade speech. Do you know what they did in the 200 years after? They stayed. Anyone can regret for a moment, young one. The humans regretted for centuries, and they built their whole species around never needing to regret it again. She looked up at Khan, with eyes that had been born in a rescue pod. You have your 8 seconds behind you now. What matters is your 200 years. Ask them how it's done. They are very good teachers. Khan, war speaker of the Sundered Banner, who had never knelt to anything, sat down slowly on the deck of a human hangar and put his head in his hands, and Vekk knew the war his hatred started 40 years ago had finally ended, not in fire, but in a hangar bay, in front of a grave, at the feet of the smallest person in the room. The galaxy learned the truth of the closed stars that year, on humanity's churns and the Vefs. And the scavengers the humans had feared came in a different form than expected. A dozen species petitioning, almost sheepishly, to help stand the watch. The Concord signed the garden's protection into its own law. The sundered banner dissolved, most of its warriors accepting the Vaith Elder's sentence, which the human courts, to their visible astonishment, upheld. 200 years of service to the living, one generation at a time. Han serves it still, in the garden, teaching Kavari fleet drill to the picket crews that guard the world he came to burn. His students adore him. It is, Vekk thinks, exactly the punishment humans would have chosen, which is why the Vekk thought of it first. As for Vekk, he did not go home. He petitioned instead for the thing no alien had ever asked for, and after a year of astonished human committees, he received it. While on a spring morning in the golden light of a hidden star, aboard a white ship, in sight of the broken spiral of the Seralin, Vekk Tarash of Sindrau Reach became the first non-human in history to take the oath. 9 words in a language not his own, sworn on a book of names that now had one Kavari hand adding to its pages, because Captain Voss, on her retirement, had given the ledger's pen to him. But he keeps it in the small steel room behind the door with the broken circle, and once a year he reads the names. All of them, human and Kavari, and the long, long roll of the Vaith. And when he reaches the page in the middle, he no longer stops on his brother's name in a human's handwriting. He turns one page further, to the line he added himself the night he finally understood, the only entry in the whole ancient book that is not a name at all. It says, "The humans were never afraid to fire first. They were afraid of who they would become afterward, and they loved who they were more than they feared us." Thank you for watching. Please comment for next part.